Hi, I'm Jenny Boylan, and here's a short reading from my book, She's Not There, A Life in Two Genders. I was born in 1958, on June 22nd, the second day of summer. It was also the birthday of Meryl Streep and Chris Christopherson, both of whom I later resembled, although not at the same time. One day, when I was about 3, I was sitting in a pool of sunlight cast on the wooden floor beneath my mother's ironing board. She was watching Art Linkletter's House Party on TV. I saw her ironing my father's white shirt, a sprinkle of water from her blue plastic bottle, a short spurt of steam as it sizzled beneath the iron. "Someday, you'll wear shirts like this," said Mom. I just listened to her strange words as if they were a language other than English. She never wore shirts like that. Why would I ever be wearing shirts like my father's? Since then, the awareness that I was in the wrong body, living the wrong life, was never out of my conscious mind. Never, although my understanding of what it meant to be a boy or a girl was something that changed over time. Still, this conviction was present during my piano lesson with Mr. Hockenberry, and it was there when my father and I shot off model rockets, and it was there years later when I took in the SAT, and it was there in the middle of the night when I woke in my dormitory at Leslie. And at every moment, as I lived my life, I countered this awareness with an exasperated companion thought, namely, don't be an idiot. You're not a girl. Get over it. But I never got over it. I did not know the word transsexual back then, and the word transgendered had not yet been invented. I heard the word transvestite, but it didn't seem to apply to me. It sounded kind of creepy. In my mind, I sometimes confused it with the words that describe cave formations. What is it again? The transvestites grow down from the top of the cave, and the transvestmites grow up from the bottom? But even if I'd known the right definitions for these words, I'm not sure it would have made much difference to me. Even now, a discussion of transgendered people frequently resembles a conversation about aliens. Do you think there really are transgendered people? Has the government known about them for years and is keeping the whole business secret? Where do they come from and what do they want? Have they been living secretly among us for years? Although my understanding of exactly how much trouble I was in grew more specific over time, as a child I surely knew enough about my condition to know it was something I'd better keep private. By intuition, I was certain that the thing I knew to be true was something others would find both impossible and hilarious. My conviction, for what it's worth, had nothing to do with a desire to be feminine. It had everything to do with being female. It certainly had nothing to do with whether I was attracted to girls or boys. This last point is the one that years later would most frequently elude people. That being gay or lesbian is about sexual orientation. Being transgender is about identity. What it's emphatically not is a lifestyle, any more than being male or female is a lifestyle. When I imagine a person with a lifestyle, I see a millionaire playboy named Chip, who likes to race yachts to Bimini, or an accountant, perhaps, who dresses up in a suit of armor on the weekend. Being transgender isn't like that. Gender is many things, but one thing that is surely not is a hobby. Being female is not something I did because it's clever, or postmodern, or because I was a deluded, deranged narcissist. In the end, what it is, more than anything else, is a fact. It's the dilemma of the transsexual, though, that it is a fact that cannot possibly be understood without imagination. After I grew up and became female, people would often ask me, "How did you know when you were a child? How is it possible you could believe with such heartbroken conviction something that, on the surface of it, seems so stupid?" This question always baffled me, as I could hardly imagine what it would be like not to know what your gender was. It seemed obvious to me that this was something you understood intuitively, not on the basis of what was between your legs, but because of what you felt in your heart. "Remember when you woke up this morning?" I'd say to my female friends, "and you knew you were female?" That's how I felt. That's how I knew. Of course, knowing with such absolute certainty something that appeared to be both absurd and untrue made me, as we said back in Pennsylvania, kind of mental. It was an absurdity I carried everywhere, a crushing burden, which was simultaneously invisible. Trying to make the best of things, trying to snap out of it, didn't help either. As time went on, that burden only grew heavier and heavier and heavier. After I grew up and became female, people would often ask me, how did you know when you were a child? How is it possible you could believe with such heartbroken conviction something that, on the surface of it, seems so stupid? This question always baffled me, as I could hardly imagine what it was like not to know what your gender was. It seemed obvious to me that this was something that you understood intuitively, not on the basis of what was between your legs, because of what you felt in your heart. Remember when you woke up this morning and you knew you were female? I'd say to my female friends, that's how I felt. That's how I knew. Of course, knowing with such absolute certainty something that appeared to be both absurd and untrue made me, as we said back in Pennsylvania, kind of mental. It was an absurdity I carried everywhere, a crushing burden which was, simultaneously, invisible. Trying to make the best of things, trying to snap out of it, didn't help either. As time went on, that burden only grew heavier and heavier and heavier. The first time I remember trying to come up with some sort of solution to the being alive problem was about 1968, when I was staying in a summer house in Surf City, New Jersey. A hurricane was approaching. My parents were away watching my sister ride horses, and I was being tended by my dipsomaniac grandmother, Gammy, and her friend, Hilda Watson, a tiny woman from North Yorkshire who was as deaf as a blacksmith's anvil. Since it was nearly impossible for Hilda to hear even the loudest sounds, most of the time she sat in a chair wearing a startled expression. When she was aware she was being spoken to, she made a soft whooping sound, similar to the squeals of a guinea pig. And I'll imitate that sound right now. Whoop, 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 whoop. Okay. This is my dog Ranger. All right, cameraman, back on the professor. Thank you. Also present was my eccentric Aunt Nora, who liked to make sock puppets as a gesture of love. One time she made me, out of one of my father's black socks, an octopus with a mustache and a red top hat. On the day the hurricane hit, I'd taken a walk underneath the boardwalk. It was as close to infinity as I can imagine under there, the row of pylons and boardwalks stretching as far as I could see. All around me were the echoes of the ocean and the howling wind and the seagulls and the rain, the smells of creosote and tar. I was taking a big walk. On this big walk, I was trying to solve whatever it was that was wrong with me. I walked down the tunnel beneath the boardwalk, trying to figure out what the deal was with being alive. I knew I wasn't a girl. By then it was clear enough girls and I were different. But just as clearly, I wasn't a boy either. What was I? What was going to happen to me if I didn't stop wanting to be a girl all the time? I got as far as a fishing pier and I left the place below the boardwalk and climbed out on the jetty next to the pier. Waves were already crashing up angrily against the rocks and rain was starting to fall. The wind whipped my hair around. I sat on the farthest rock and looked out at the sea and watched the ocean for a long time. And then I thought, maybe you could be cured by love. Even then, I think I was aware of how corny this sounded. Still, I believed it to be true. If I were loved deeply enough by others, perhaps I would be content to stay a boy.
Oh. I can put in sound effects if I want to.
My 13-year-old camera person is putting in some sound effects. And I just stepped on the dog's ear. Sorry, puppy. I walked back to the apartment with this newfound awareness surrounding me like a call. I would start with my grandmother. I opened the door to find Gabby and Mrs. Watson playing gin and drinking vodka. Gabby was describing the night of my father's conception. "Best screwing I ever had," she said. I stared at her. "What's with you?" "Nothing," I said. Mrs. Watson was listening to the Zombies on the AM radio. "Well, it's too late to say you're sorry. Well, it's too late to say you're sorry. How would I know? Why should I? Well, it's too late to say you're sorry. Why should I know? Why should I care? Please don't try to find her. She's not there. It was odd that Mrs. Watson or any of these women would be listening to the Zombies, since they were all classical music fans. Why is Hilda listening to WFIL? I asked. Shh, said Gammy. She thinks it's classical. So, that's a short reading from She's Not There.